Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together, so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, naturopathic physician and your guide on your health awakening journey. Today, we're talking all about healing at home. Because if you've been following along, maybe something has shifted within you. You might be seeing your health a little bit differently. You might be realizing that your body is not broken and understanding that symptoms are not random. You've been connecting your gut with your hormones, your stress, sleep, your environment, your nervous system, and the way that you're living. You've woken up. And now comes the big question. Okay, what do I actually do with this awareness? Of course, if we've worked together one-on-one through the Vital Spirit method, and we've uncovered root causes and gone over labs, and we've written up protocols for you, you probably don't feel stuck. But if you're following along and you've listened to podcasts and maybe you've run labs on your own and you've had your health awakening, but you haven't had that one-on-one guidance, then you might be feeling stuck. Maybe you don't feel well yet, or you feel overwhelmed trying to do everything and still somehow not knowing exactly where to begin every day to promote your health. This is because awareness, while essential, is not the same as embodiment. It is not the same thing as having a skill in how to care for yourself. And it's not the same thing as knowing how to care for yourself in real time when your body starts asking for something with symptoms. Of course, if you're a patient, you can reach out to me, and that's amazing. But I really wanted to provide you with something today if you're not a patient and you're doing this on your own. Of course, healing does not happen in theory. I love talking about the philosophy of healing, but healing happens in how you live every single day. And that's what I want to talk about today. In naturopathic medicine, we have a principle, vis medicatrix naturae. We've been talking all about this, the healing power of nature. And what that means in the most practical sense is that the body already knows how to heal when the right conditions are in place. The body's not passive. It's not waiting helplessly for a rescue. It's always trying to adapt, regulate, protect, eliminate, repair, and move back toward balance or homeostasis. So the real question becomes, how do we create those conditions every day? How do we create the conditions for health? We talked about this a lot in our Seeds of Health episode. Not just in protocols, not just in a supplement plan, not just in our one-on-one time in an appointment, but in your real life every single day. How do we cultivate health? Because healing should not just happen in a doctor's office. It happens at home. It happens in your kitchen, in the morning, in the evening routine that you have. It happens in your sleep patterns, the food that you're putting in your body, your light exposure, your breath work, your relationships, your daily rhythms, and your ability to notice what the body is asking for before it has to get louder. Once we've resolved some of the symptoms that maybe you came in with, if you have a chronic health condition, we learn how to track those symptoms and how to prevent them from recurring. So, of course, at the beginning of our health awakening journey, many women come to me asking what supplements to take or what protocol to follow. And those things can absolutely have a place. I do use supplements. I do build protocols. I believe deeply in clinical precision and individualized medicine. But what I'm actually trying to teach here today is something deeper than that. What I want women to begin learning is how to think a little bit more like a naturopath on their own in their own daily lives. And I want to be clear about something. This is not always intuitive in the beginning, even though our body innately knows how to heal. This is learned. And one of the primary ways I see women begin to learn this is actually through the gut brain axis work we do in the first pillar of the Vital Spirit method. Because when we're starting to work with the gut, we're not just changing digestion, we're changing all of the signaling pathways that are downstream from that. We're changing our immune tone. We're influencing neurotransmitter production throughout our body. We're shifting how the nervous system perceives safety and danger. And as that begins to change, something really important happens. Symptoms become more trackable and patterns become more predictable. The body is becoming more responsive to smaller, more precise interventions. And that's often the moment where this way of thinking starts to click for patients. Not by memorizing protocols or learning every herb or homeopathic remedy that I might use, but by learning how to recognize patterns. Because once you begin to recognize patterns, your response can change. So, for example, if your system feels wired or reactive or overstimulated on a day, you can begin to feel the difference between needing more stimulation and needing something that softens your system. So, maybe instead of pushing through or reaching for something strong like a cup of coffee to get through the day, you might find yourself making a cup of chamomile or lemon balm or passion flower tea. Not because Dr. Kelly told you to take a Nervine, but because you recognized your nervous system state, because now we have the language around that. Maybe you feel the edges of your nervous system becoming a little frayed or your window of tolerance decreasing because we've talked about it before. Maybe you're less flexible and you notice that shift. From a physiological perspective, what you are often feeling there is a shift in autonomic balance, a shift in your nervous system tone. You might be starting to notice the pattern that your body and your mind go into when you have increased sympathetic activation. Maybe you know now what it feels like in your mind or body when your vagal tone is reduced. You might start to perceive shifts in heart rate variability and altered signaling through the gut brain axis. So, when vagal tone is lower, digestion changes, motility changes, so the amount that you're having bowel movements might change, and inflammatory signaling shifts as a result in that change of vagal tone. So maybe you're seeing an increase in histamine response, and now you know, oh, that itchiness, that histamine response is directly related to the state that my nervous system is in and whether or not my body feels safe. So maybe your sleep has been impacted, and instead of panicking and thinking, oh, I'm going back to that time when I wasn't able to sleep, you've been tracking that pattern and you know exactly what's going on. So instead of having the story in your mind, I'm just having anxiety, you've noticed that there's a full body shift in regulation. And when you understand that, your intervention can become much more precise. So you're not just calming the mind, you're influencing the entire regulatory system. As we've worked through the gut brain axis, you might have learned that when your digestion slows down and feels heavy and stagnant or leans toward constipation, you're understanding, okay, this isn't just bloating, this is movement that's not happening well. And so instead of ignoring it or jumping immediately to restricting your diet or to a harsh laxative, you might bring in some bitter herbs that we've done together, maybe some dandelion tea or burdock root or gentian, some bitter herb sprays that we've used through the gut brain axis, or a little fresh ginger tea. Maybe you realize your body's asking for something as simple as apple cider vinegar in water before a meal. Because once you understand that bitterness stimulates bile and bile helps things move through the body and the GI tract, you know, okay, bile's not just about my digestion and movement. Bile's also a primary route through which the body clears hormones and toxins and inflammatory byproducts. So now you're thinking along the lines of, okay, I have this itchiness, this histamine response. I have this increased anxiety. I've also noticed that my bowels have changed. Let me reach for that bitter herb that I've used before, that old friend, that ginger, that gentian, that dandelion, and let's start moving things through the body. Because you've learned that your microbiome balance is going to be impacted by how well you're moving your bowels. And you've learned that when your bile is sluggish, we start to see more patterns of constipation and hormonal congestion and more skin issues and increased reactivity. So, something as simple as supporting bile flow and digestion becomes a systemic intervention. Over time, this becomes learning the language of your body because herbs speak in qualities. So, some herbs move things through the body. Some herbs warm you. Some herbs cool you. Some dry you. Some stimulate. Some nourish. Some calm. So, when you learn what herbs to reach for and what patterns match in your body and in your system, you become someone who can heal at home on your own. Your body is constantly expressing similar qualities that might be aligned with different herbal patterns. This same pattern based thinking applies in a different way, but similar to homeopathy. So, in homeopathy, when we're using dilute amount of substances, we're not asking what is the diagnosis. We're not trying to suppress a symptom. We're asking what is the pattern of this person's experience. So, a sudden onset of a symptom that feels really intense, panicky, especially after exposure to cold or shock, has a very different quality than something that builds slowly over time. Or a hot, red, throbbing fever state feels very different than a chilly, restless, anxious, depleted state. An irritable, overstimulated, driven pattern is going to feel a lot different than a soft, weepy, hormonally sensitive pattern that wants comfort or space. So, as women begin to observe themselves more closely and you start to recognize those differences, this is where homeopathy becomes such a powerful teaching tool because it's asking you to observe at a different level. You're not just asking what a symptom is, you're asking, how did this start? What makes it better or worse? What's the emotional tone of the experience? What's the pace and the timing? What's the temperature? And that kind of observation changes your relationship with your body even before a remedy even starts to work. Maybe through your health awakening journey, we've started to use cell salts, which are a really amazing entry point into this kind of medicine. They're super subtle and they work gently with the body. They meet the body exactly where it is. I've been using a cell salt blend with my daughter to help a tooth come in. And every morning she wakes up and she says, Mama, it's helping my tooth come in. So I'm sure I'll have an episode devoted to them. But essentially, they work very gently. And for example, when there's that tight, cramping, constricted tension, or if warmth is helping a symptom, I'm going to reach for a particular cell salt versus when there's maybe early inflammation and fever or deep depletion or fluid imbalance and swelling. Again, the goal is not to memorize which cell salt or which remedy to use in which situation. It's to begin noticing these patterns and noticing what your body is telling you. At the cellular level, each of these small shifts is really important. So, mineral signaling influences nerve conduction and muscle contraction and fluid balance and cellular communication within our body. So, when our systems are dysregulated, the subtle support of a cell salt and mineral signaling can really help establish homeostasis and balance again. So, in a more sensitive or depleted patient, I'm probably reaching a lot more for something like a cell salt or a homeopathic remedy. So, if you've learned how to utilize these with me, or you're just hearing about them now, the point is that once you begin to understand that there are natural remedies, there are these tools that work with your body, you learn that your home can become a place of medicine again. And I mean this in a very real naturopathic sense, not just a bunch of wellness products on your shelf. I do often do medicine cabinet audits with patients where we go through everything they have. Is this even a good product? What are the actual ingredients? Where were they sourced? Is this even effective? And it's definitely not about trying every wellness trend, but really learning how to build a simple, intelligent relationship with a few categories of natural tools and modalities that you actually understand and know how to use based on your symptom patterns and what you're experiencing in the moment. Because once you stop seeing those symptoms as meaningless and you start seeing them as communication, then you stop needing aggressive, dramatic interventions. Sometimes what the body needs is definitely not more force. It's the right nudge at the right time in the right direction. And a huge part of working with me one on one is learning how to do this. And so I hope that I can impart some of that to you today. And that's really the basis of the home medicine cabinet. So, yes, we've probably talked about using food as medicine. We'll talk all about garlic and onion and ginger and apple cider vinegar and herbs and spices and turmeric, right? But we're also building a home medicine cabinet so that we don't have to suppress our symptoms anymore and stop the healing process. When I think about what belongs there in a home medicine cabinet, I'm usually thinking about a few broad categories. So I'm thinking about herbs, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, cell salts, and definitely how to use these every single day for prevention. With herbs, I really want women to understand that herbs are not just natural treatments. They're nourishment and regulation and their communication. They can be daily medicine and they can be therapeutic medicine acutely. So you can use herbs every single day in teas, in tinctures, in your bath, in cooking, in salves and compresses, in honey, in broths. And when you start understanding things like taste, herbal energetics, or system affinity, you begin to build a relationship with them. So, for example, a bitter herb is different from a sweet demulcent herb. A warming herb is different from a cooling herb. A drying herb is different from a moistening one. So, even before we talk about individual herbs, I want you to begin thinking in terms of constitution and state. Does your body feel cold, stagnant, and slow? Or does it feel hot, inflamed, and reactive? Are you dry and depleted? Or do you feel boggy, puffy, and congested? All of those different patterns and states are going to matter when you're selecting an herb. So, for example, if I want an astringent herb to dry or tone things, I'm going to pick a different herb than if I want an herb that's warming or moistening. So, just starting to learn that there's different herbs for different patterns is step one. If you are feeling anxious or reactive, maybe you're not sleeping well and you're getting heart palpitations, that classic wired but tired state, I'm often thinking about nervous system support first. So in the herbalism world, that might mean nervines, chamomile, lemon balm, passion flower, skullcap, or milky oats or oat straw, herbs that help the system to settle, regulate, and feel less jagged. But if you're feeling sluggish, constipated, and bloated after your meals, and maybe you're having daily headaches and PMS and angry acne, skin flares, or histamine burden, so itchiness, then I'm probably thinking more about congestion and movement. In that case, I'm probably going to reach more for those bitter herbs I mentioned before and digestive support, like dandelion, gentian, burdock, milk thistle, ginger, depending on the constitution. Ginger is a warming herb. So if that patient's also already really warm and hot, I'm probably going to reach more toward a cooling herb. Maybe we are going to layer in apple cider vinegar as a digestive support before meals if you're feeling like your digestion is weak and your food is just sitting in your stomach. Or if you're more depleted and flat and feeling less resilient, less motivated, like you're dragging yourself through the day, that's a completely different picture, right? So there I might be thinking more about tonic and restorative herbs or adaptogenic support. But I'm still going to be careful because not everyone needs a stimulating adaptogenic herb. Some need more calming. So a dysregulated person can feel worse if we give the wrong adaptogen. So again, it comes back to pattern recognition and knowing the state. And this is why when we begin working together, patients might want to know what herb is good for this symptom or have you ever used this herb? But the real question is, what state is my body in right now? And what category of support makes the most sense for my body to move through and complete this response? And that applies to homeopathy too. So homeopathy is very different from herbal medicine. It's not working in the same way, and that's part of why I love it. It's one of the clearest examples of medicine that respects individuality, and it's based on the law of similars. Like cures like. We use very small doses to stimulate the body's own healing response. So it's true vitalistic medicine. What matters in homeopathy is not just the diagnosis. Again, it's not, am I treating acne? Am I treating PMS? Am I treating depression? What really matters is the pattern and the person's way of expressing the symptom. What matters is the onset. How quickly did it come on? The emotional tone, the particular details around how that person is responding every day. So, say someone becomes acutely ill with a sudden onset of fear, panic, and maybe this comes on after being exposed to cold. Well, aconite might be the first remedy that comes to mind. Or if there's heat, redness, throbbing, and a fever, then belladonna might make more sense. If someone is restless and anxious and cold, and maybe they have some GI upset and they're tired but agitated, then arsenicum might be what I grab. Completely different from Nux vomica, which is one I might think about for overdriven modern constitutions, kind of overindulging, irritable, overstimulated, overworked, digestive stress, too much coffee, too much alcohol, too much doing. Or pulsatilla has a completely different feeling. That's softer, more weepy, more hormonal, more changeable, needing comfort, not wanting force. The point is that not everyone listening needs to become a homeopath overnight. Homeopathy teaches a different way of seeing, though. It teaches attentiveness to the terrain. And it teaches that two people can have the same diagnosis and need entirely different support and entirely different remedies. And as you start to get familiar with your patterns and what remedies tend to work for you, you're going to have these tools in your at-home toolkit. Maybe the homeopathy isn't working in a certain situation and you're reaching for a cell salt. Like I mentioned, Mag Phos earlier is wonderful for cramping and spasms and tension. And when constricted pain is occurring, but warmth helps. Or Cali Phos is one that I might reach for when there's nervous exhaustion. So that person who feels frayed, burnt out, just overstimulated, not sleeping deeply, like their nerves are just shot. I'm going to reach for Cali Phos. Or Ferrum Phos, I might use in early signs of inflammation or immune activation. So maybe when the body is just beginning to mount an immune response to an infection. I might reach for Natrum muriaticum cell salt instead of Natrum muriaticum homeopathy when there's fluid stagnation or emotional stagnation and swelling. Fluid imbalance or certain types of headache or dryness in some places or a grief pattern that's maybe more internal is going to indicate that I reach for that remedy. So again, I'm not trying to turn this into a remedy course, but I do want you to hear that there are so many different layers of support available to you, and we don't have to jump straight into suppression. As we work together, and say we've worked on the gut-brain axis and we've balanced your microbiome and digestion is working well again, and we're starting to work on our stress response and we start to develop an infection, we don't want to reach for an antibiotic and knock back that microbiome work that we did. So it's really important when I first start working with patients to learn some of these tools that work with your vis, that work with your vital force to help resolve a symptom or an experience that you're having, so that yes, you're not suffering through it, but you have this whole new toolkit that you can use. So now let's make this practical, because this is where the way of thinking starts to become something that you can actually live every day. This is really the shift that I want you to begin making. Not asking what to take, but learning how to recognize what your body is doing and how to respond to it. Because once you start to see your body through this lens, symptoms will stop feeling random and they will start to feel like things that you can interpret. And that's where a different kind of confidence begins, not from having all the answers or knowing exactly what's going on. Of course, patients will still call me in acute situations, but my goal is to teach you how to do this and to know how to think about your health. We're going to pause here because in the next episode, I want to take this even further into how this actually looks in real life, how you can use even more of these tools at home, and how you will respond when you start to notice things shifting in your health. And how do you begin to work with your body in real time? So I'll see you in part 2. Have a great day.